Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening. On behalf of the High Commission of India in Singapore and its partners at today's event, the Institute of South Asian Studies Singapore, the CII IBF Singapore, the Singapore Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, and the ICAI Singapore chapter, we extend a very warm welcome to all of you who are able to join in today's evening's conversation with the Honorable Minister for External Affairs, Mr. Salman Khurshid. Without further ado, I would now like to invite Mr. Girija Pandey, the immediate past president of the CII IBF, to deliver the welcome note. Mr. Pandey.
His Excellency Mr. Salman Khurshid, Honorable Minister of External Affairs, Government of India, Her Excellency Mrs. Vijay Thakur Singh, High Commissioner of India to Singapore, Ambassador Gopinath Pillai, Chairman Institute of South Asian Studies, Mr. Narayan Mohan, Chairman SICCI, ladies and gentlemen. Let me first extend a warm welcome to our special guest who is here. He has just come in straight from the airport from Manila, and he is going to talk today on the economic imperatives of Indian foreign policy. So I think many of us who are business people here would find it very interesting to look at, to hear him on the economic imperatives of the foreign policy. Now, I think all of us are aware of the way Indian business has globalized. We are aware of all the issues that go with globalization. And whenever Indian business has stepped out either for investments or for exports, there is a need for a helping hand from the government. And I think foreign policy mandarins are increasingly getting involved in the business of Indian business. They're going out. And this is a global phenomenon. Every country does that, and I think India has started doing that very well as well. If you look at just the simple thing of the Singapore-India story, the business story, started with the signing of the Comprehensive Economic Partnership. It's not that Indian business was not in Singapore before that. But since the CICA, and I was involved, I remember in 2005, in the CICA negotiations, we have seen a tripling of volumes, of number of Indian businessmen. Today, Indian companies are the largest in Singapore in terms of any other nationality. So I think here we have one of the excellent free trade agreement, a comprehensive agreement, which has driven business. And it was driven by foreign policy imperative of India, which was to look east. Singapore was obviously seen as the first post where this look east policy would be taken up. So we've seen that, and we've seen the benefits of this. When we formed in the CII, when we formed the India Business Forum, it was India Inc. which is here. Similarly, there's an India Business Forum in China, there's one in UK, US, which is working with the government many times on how to improve trade relations, how to look at some of the issues around, and this is where I think the foreign policy and the issues of Indian business. I recall that when I was building business for Tata Consultancy in China, the JV with the government, we had a huge amount of support from the embassy and the ambassador to help us open the markets for IT industry, which was closed at that time in 2001, 2002 in China. And similarly, as many companies have noticed, as they look for bidding in tenders, as they look for setting up offices, as they look for taxes and all the entitlements under the various trade laws, it is very important that our foreign policy is aligned with the Indian economic goals of the Indian business. So I think we are going to hear much of that from the minister. And I would, before I pass on the mic to the Minister, let me just give some of you who don't know him a little bit of an introduction to Mr. Salman Khurshid, who's a renowned lawyer, educationist, writer, and a politician. He was born in a very distinguished family of educationists. I think many of us know that our President, Dr. Zakir Hussain, was his grandfather, and his father, Khurshid Alam Khan, was also a noted parliamentarian and a minister in the Union Cabinet. Mr. Salman Khurshid has been in St. Stephen's College and then from Oxford. He has been an educationist, served in schools and Zakir Hussain Delhi College Trust. He has been in the Congress Party in UP, where he has been in the Congress, chairman of the UP Congress Committee, and he has served as ministers in various capacities in the center. He has been a Union Cabinet Minister of Law and Justice, and now from October 2012, he has been the External Affairs Minister for India. Many of you have probably met him in Singapore or heard him. He's widely known. He's also written books. That is a very interesting part of his personality. He has acclaimed plays Son of Babur, which have been translated into several languages and performed in the country as well as UK. He's written At Home in India and If Winter Comes, better known books on Mr. Khurshid. So let me not stand between the Minister and you. May I invite the Minister for his address. Thank you.
Good afternoon to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. It's very encouraging to be invited for the second time to speak to a very distinguished audience of people interested in India and Singapore relations, particularly with a focus on economics. I have a prepared text, but this is a conversation, so I'll try and convert that into a conversation. I think we know each other well enough in Singapore to be able to have a frank and free-wheeling conversation, exchange ideas, because we do come to Singapore from India with intent to gather, to discover, to learn some remarkable things that have happened in your history of growth and development. And of course we know that the size of our two countries is vastly different. And we could really have thousands of Singapores in our country. If we did, you would have something to be worried about. You have thousands of our Singapores. But Singapore is an inspiration, and Singapore is a very important partner. And Singapore is a very critical part, critical segment of India's Look East policy, which is now nearly 20 years. And of course, Singapore is a very important element of our engagement with ASEAN. I'm absolutely delighted that we have here, I have the opportunity to meet once again Ambassador Gopinath Pillai. I'm absolutely honored that Girija Pale was here to introduce me, and then of course Mr. Narayan Mohan, our own High Commissioner, Mr. Vijay Thakur Das, some friends that I have met before, and some very distinguished ladies and gentlemen who are here. If I was to describe to you what Singapore means to me, is that in the lexicon of modern day politics in our country, irrespective of political positions that we may take in domestic politics, there is an aspiration to be able to emulate the efficiency, the effectiveness, and the vision that has translated itself into this remarkable success story of Singapore. And I tell you, my first experience with Singapore was as a Deputy Minister of Commerce. I was number 2 to them, Minister of State, independent charge of commerce, and that was Mr. Chidambaram, who you know quite well since then. And I sat with the then Secretary of Commerce, who's now presently again very well known to you, the Deputy Chairman of the Planning Commission, Montague Singhalawalia. And we sat across the table with a delegation from Singapore, distinguished ministers, and several times when a point was made, somebody would pass a little slip to me and say, well, you can, for the present, give that answer. And generally the slip would say that the government is seriously looking at this issue and we intend to take a view. And after I had done that 3 times, Montague gave me a slip, and that said, if you carry on doing this, they're going to get up and say, well, where is the government? We've come a long way since then. That was the point at which we were opening up to the world. There was a paradigm shift. Our present Prime Minister was then Finance Minister. Between him and Mr. Chidambaram, the blueprint that I understand was left to them by the late Prime Minister, Mr. Rajiv Gandhi, was being implemented. And there was a tremendous sense of excitement in government. People were suddenly beginning to drop shackles that we had suffered for a long time. But as we look back, we explained to our interlocutors, as we did to our own people in the country, that we didn't really see them necessarily as burdensome shackles, but we saw them in a sense as what you would call as speed regulators, that it was important for India as it strove to become a modern and successful and stable country, a successful democracy. It was important that there were elements in our economic landscape that required attention, but required attention through regulation. Perhaps the word regulation was not commonly used then, the word control was used, and maybe it was more like controls than regulation. But it was important to absent ourselves from felicity for a while, as Hamlet would say, because it was important that we allowed people to come together and reduce the distance between and the difference between the rich and the poor, the successful and the aspirational class. A class that was fed on dreams that were laid out for them by none other than Jawaharlal Nehru, our first Prime Minister, who talked of remarkable transformation of our society from an agrarian, rural, backward society to something essentially modern. And in that process, he spoke of a new vision where the modern temples he described for India would be the factories and the huge dams that would give energy to a society stirring for change. But as I said, it was important for us to provide the checks and balances because we were a huge country. We needed inclusion, participation, and we needed to address disparity, and we needed to address a new class, emerging class that wanted to participate in the growth story and in the benefits that we were able to deliver. But the benefits came largely through a decision made by government at the highest level as to what was fair inclusion, what was to be given at what level to whom. And as a result, we ended up with a more equitable society but we also ended up being a very dependent society. People began to look upon government as a provider in the narrow sense that they believed that the entire responsibility for enterprise was for the government, which in turn would provide to them on control rates or free, or perhaps as they wished and they demanded. And I think a major breakaway from that was necessary, which we did 25 years ago under the leadership of the then Prime Minister, Mr. Narasimha Rao, and the then Finance Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh. From there to now, we've had a long journey. And why am I saying this? I'm saying this because economic imperatives is the topic of the day. Economic imperatives as being the basis of foreign policy. We had a foreign policy at that time which focused on equity. A foreign policy that focused on dignity, equity, human rights, and emancipation of all human beings from subjugation by dominant forces, either economic, social, or political. And that foreign policy was described as a foreign policy based on a national consensus that was derived from our national movement, led by Mahatma Gandhi. The implements of that foreign policy and the description of that foreign policy as the Panchsheel principles of foreign policy were actually derived from the philosophy of our independence movement. And I think if anyone knows about this, the content of our independence movement, the intellectual content of our independence movement, it is Singapore, because Singapore saw the interplay of two important forces that aspired for independence of our country: those who felt it was necessary to pick up weapons, arms, to get freedom, and those who felt that arms was not an option, that no matter what the provocation, how distressful the treatment that they deserved, it was the power of truth and non-violence that would prevail. And you know the story, that at the end of the day, it was the power of truth and non-violence that succeeded. But as we changed in the 90s, we changed into a new economic paradigm for our country, and shifted the mix of a mixed economy. We never were a state-controlled economy, and we never have become, and perhaps never will in the near future, become a completely free market economy. We were a mixed economy, and we were happy to describe ourselves as a mixed economy. But that mixed economy was partly our own determination and our own ability to monitor it, but also largely dependent upon our special relationship that we had with Eastern Europe and with the Soviet Union. Much of our need of trade and fuel supply came on an arrangement in which we didn't need hard currency, we didn't need to pay in dollars, but it was an arrangement, broadly speaking, of a barter system that allowed us through that period. And of course, who can take credit for what is for historians to discover. But when we changed, we didn't change alone. The coincidence of our mix of the economy and our close relationship with the Soviet Union also had another coincidence of our changing into another mode, a paradigm shift into a different economic mix, but at the same time the collapse of the Soviet Union, the birth of new nations in our extended neighborhood, and of course the end of the barter trade and the end of rupee trade in the markets of Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union. So the challenge was for us to check out whether we were then strong enough to stand on our feet, to to compete in the marketplace of the world, and to offer something to the world in order to engage its attention. And that's when we began, as it were, the outreach to the world. And obviously it impacted our foreign policy. It couldn't but impact our foreign policy, but the important thing is that we didn't allow our foreign policy to drift away from the fundamental principles that we believed in, that we cherished, and that were the basis of the large national consensus. And I think I would not be contradicted by my worst critics in saying that the consensus that was created at the time of independence is a consensus on foreign policy that continues to this day. No matter what our political debates, for one reason or another, might project, but the fundamental consensus remains the same. There are, on the edges, there's been some fine-tuning, some changes have happened, but the fundamental consensus remains the same. But within the broad fundamental consensus, which means what? Which means we are still very strong strategic partners of Russian Federation. We have employed in our Connect Central Asian policy the important historical imperatives and historical connectivities that were available to us with that part of the Soviet Union. Now, as independent states, reaching out to us, emphasizing our historical links, emphasizing our regional links, and looking at commonalities of being able to work together. But in the years to come, a very important element of that will be our energy security, that we will be able to see one day the Tapi pipeline to begin with, perhaps many more will come, but the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline bringing gas from Central Asia into India, where our industry is hungry for energy. There are alternatives, but this seems today, despite the fact that we have issues with Pakistan, despite the fact that there is still some uncertainty about how quickly Afghanistan will settle into a stable democratic future after 2014, we have confidence and we have faith in Afghanistan weathering the storm. We have a commitment to Afghanistan. We have no exit policy for Afghanistan. We believe that Afghanistan will be and must be a great hub between South Asia, Southeast Asia, South Asia, and Central Asia. And of course, beyond from there, beyond into Eurasia and into Europe. And so what does it do? It combines our commitment of the past as traditional friends of Afghanistan, our commitment to Afghanistan as part of our extended neighborhood, but also as part of the larger economic landscape that we see for ourselves between India and Central Asia. And when we look at Central Asia, we don't look at Central Asia for ourselves alone. We look for Central Asia also as we look to ourselves, India, as a passage for all of the Indian Ocean, and indeed all of the IRA members, all the way to ASEAN and Australia into Central Asia. And we do hope that India will thus become a very important passage to Central Asia. A passage to India will become a passage to Central Asia. We then, of course, have a look east policy that's been mentioned, a very important part of our foreign policy. Look east policy, again, historical links. Historical links apparent here in all the ASEAN countries, apparent as far as Philippines from where I've just come. But that look east policy now translating itself into a new dimension of economic interdependence. You need markets, we need technology and investment. And I think that plays well today. Of course, when we talk about investment, it isn't investment only one way. India today, as a stable, major emerging economy, cannot just expect investments to come home and not invest in other countries as well. So we are very happy to invest across the globe, particularly in this part of the world, in Singapore, and I think therefore our investment profile here is well known to you, whether it's in the area of finance and banking, in the area of manufacturer services, in the area of trade, goods, and supply of essentials to Singapore. We remain hugely committed. But as you can see, two separate levels. One level that appeals more intuitively and immediately to ordinary people, citizens of one country, combining and connecting with citizens of another country, trying to weave together a fabric of global citizens. But above that, or below that, depending on your perception, is a layer of economic connectivity. After all, what does a human being really aspire to do with life? What is the dream of a person? Is to live a life with dignity, to give his or her children a better life than they have led, open up opportunities for families and their children. And when that as an aggregate comes as an option or aspiration of people of a country, that becomes a part of the public policy of that country. And I hope that India is able to respond to this aspiration of people in Singapore who are happy with what they have achieved. You are truly a happy country. Perhaps haven't reached the level where you look at happiness quotients like our neighbor Bhutan does. But I see no reason why you shouldn't. From intellect quotient to growth rates to GDPs, and why not happiness? And I think if anyone can believe that happiness is an important part of your national outlook, I believe Singapore is one such country that can aim to do that. So, as we look at Singapore in this multinational manner, what do we have? We have the significant figures, and I don't need to dwell on those figures for too long. The FDI in the last fiscal was around 14 billion US dollars. In the first quarter of the current fiscal year, FDI grew by 20% into India to 7.1 billion US dollars, of which Singapore contributed 2.2 billion. Our requirement is in the order of 1 trillion US dollars in infrastructure sectors like power, ports, roads, railways, airports, water supply, sewage treatment, sanitation, etc. in the next 5 years. And that's only with one or two small mini Singapore cities in our country, which we are aspiring. And I said, why not think of 1,000 countries, or 1,000 Singapores in India? I want to say very clearly and categorically, because sometimes there are doubts about, is there a plateau? Is there a plateau in our relationship between ASEAN and India, between Singapore and India? Is there a reform fatigue, if you like, in India? And the answer is no. The government is committed to reform, to revive domestic investments, curtail fiscal deficit, and attract foreign funds. So, therefore, we've taken initiatives to promote FDI, which includes through measures such as increase in FDI in the telecom sector to 74%, and in insurance and aviation sectors to 49%, respectively. And I do believe that in the near future there will be joint ventures from Singapore flying into India. We've also liberalized the FDI policies in single brand retail trading, in publishing, in real estate, in asset reconstruction firms. And of course, most of all, what you want to hear is that we have taken steps to fast-track clearances of large infrastructure projects. We do realize that we have difficulties, and I do want to explain to you what our difficulties have been. But now we have a committee, a cabinet committee headed by the Prime Minister, that all of us, whichever ministry is involved in dragging our feet, have to appear before that committee and ensure that clearances are done there. I mentioned the telecom sector, and I think telecom sector is a sector which I must now dwell upon to explain to you why there was a slowdown in India. The slowdown in India happened because we moved very fast. I said to you earlier that when we were afraid to move fast in the early years of independence, it was because of our perception and understanding that if we move fast, a lot of people would be left behind, and that would lead to social unrest. We now in another phase of moving fast, and we moved very fast in the telecom sector. We outstripped landlines in a matter of months. And our idea of the telecom sector was that it is not money that we need, that the government doesn't need revenues as much as it needs penetration, because the penetration in due course would institutionalize into revenue. But more than that, the penetration in the telecom sector would give us a vast new opening to implement many of the projects that we are now today handling, whether it's in the financial sector, it's in the health sector, it's in a variety of outreach programs that would not have been efficiently possible but for the telecom sector growing exponentially. Unfortunately, having moved very fast, we found that there were many institutions that were still gravitationally being pulled back in time, and our Supreme Court was one such institution. Our Supreme Court has done some remarkable work over the years since independence. It has done the most creative jurisprudential work in the world. It has virtually rewritten the constitution of our country in a wholesome and beneficial manner, starting with the bland words of equality or the bland words of liberty. They have created remarkable jurisprudence that allows all kinds of interesting things to happen and protect the citizen far beyond anybody could have ever imagined. Of course, there will be scholars who will disagree about the extent to which an unelected body can intervene and interfere in public policy, something that the court itself is conscious of and continues to remind itself repeatedly that it cannot interfere in some parts of policy making, but will be able to interfere only those parts that are concerned with specific constitutional provisions, such as the provision of non-discrimination, equality, and so on and so forth. My belief is that the economics of the telecom sector was not fully understood by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court understood the traditional arguments of law, but there are non-traditional arguments now that judges have to face more and more. And I do believe that your courts are trying to handle them. Many of our courts are trying to handle them. The American Supreme Court has always adhered to something called the economic analysis of law. Not just to be amateur sociologists, but they have to become professional economists as well. It's very important that the structure of our courts responds to the demands of our time. Litigation, conflict resolution today is far different from the times when the courts were handling only issues of property, such as huge landed property that was in the hands of a few people, and it was the desire of government and the duty of government to ensure that there was distribution of wealth, including property. And those were the early years when the Supreme Court creatively tried to balance what was called individual rights against the rights of society. But now again, I think a new challenge has come to the Supreme Court, and that challenge is to understand modern economy. Now, if Jagdish Bharati and Amartya Sen cannot agree, it is difficult for two lawyers at the Supreme Court to be able to get the judges to agree. So we need to find new instruments, new systems, perhaps new structures by which we can feed to the judges what is fundamentally essential to decide what is economically appropriate, right, and good for society. Of course, there's a lot of material on welfare and economics, for instance, and a lot of material on monetary policies, and a lot of material on economic structures. But this is only something that I am giving to you as an explanation of why, in some areas of law, we got a drag. We got a drag because we moved very fast, and the institutions hadn't developed the capacity to move as fast as we did. Natural resources followed from spectrum arguments, and therefore the issue of what to do with natural resources. We had issues about water, we had issues about coal, we had issues about minerals, we had issues about forest wealth, etc. But I think that what is happening now is that we are beginning to address all those issues through modern legislation that provides enough flexibility, but at the same time, the same kind of balance that we believe is important to keep the body and soul of a society together, and that not have some people question it. So while this is one issue that we've addressed, the important thing, of course, now is and I'm sure for those who are serious about trade with India, is that the current account deficit that we are committed to bringing down to 2.5%, today stands at 4.9%. And let me explain to you again why that has happened. It was a difficult choice. When the world was slowing down, when Indian exports were dropping as they were for anywhere else in the world, we had faith in the fundamentals of our economy, and we felt that if we provided stimulus packages, we would see through the country through that difficult period. And that time, our present president was the finance minister. 3 stimulus packages were given. It led to a huge runaway inflation, particularly inflation in food items. And that was unacceptable. We think that inflation beyond 4 to 5% is unacceptable for a country like India. We were hitting a ceiling of 22%, 23% food inflation. And so there had to be a squeeze on money supply. And the squeeze on money supply has its own detrimental impact on manufacturing, on investment. And therefore, suddenly, the 7 and 8% growth rate began to drop. And it dropped to 5%. But we are confident that we weathered the storm, and this 5% will go back to 7 and 8% in the next 2 years. That's the important thing. And we will have, because our fundamentals are strong, we will be able to bring down the current account deficit to 2.5%. We did go through a little turbulence as far as the rupee is concerned. We do believe, honestly believe, that 68 was nowhere near what the real value of rupee is. Perhaps 58 to 61 is the range of the real value of the rupee, and beyond that was entirely speculation. But look at how quickly, 2 weeks, and we are back to 61. So I think we've taken care of the worst period, and we can now start looking at what to do with investment. Our saving rates have remained high, above 30%. Now all we need to do is to stimulate internal investment and, of course, foreign direct investment into India. One important thing for those who know markets and weak markets, even when things were looking grim for India from our point of view, I think we were, to the Europeans, not looking too bad. People who had 0% growth, 1% growth, were saying to me, you should be laughing to the bank at 5% growth. 5% growth is not a small thing for countries that were actually facing a recession. But an important thing, it's a small cameo of an information. While we were going through that tough period, the sales in rural India of two-wheelers, the sales in rural India of two-wheelers was skyrocketing. And why was that happening? Because we have empowered rural India, and that is the massive market of tomorrow. We've empowered rural India with enormous shift from of terms of trade from urban to rural. Enormous amount of infrastructure investment, ensuring that over the next 5 years, all the villages of our country will be provided electricity, at least linkage with electricity. We still have a major effort to ensure that there is enough electric power available to charge every village and to provide every village with power as they need, and then of course to have enough for our industry as well. So, if I might just go back briefly to our relationship with the ASEAN, we are very, very pleased that we have a strategic partnership. We celebrated the commemorative summit in New Delhi in December 2012. The theme was ASEAN-India Partnership for Peace and Shared Prosperity, which is what we focus with you as in terms of a theme. We are looking at the large picture. We are looking at ASEAN's centrality as the driving force for economic and security structures in the entire Southeast Asian region. We support the vision of ASEAN Community for 2015, and we contribute to that initiative for ASEAN integration and the ASEAN Master Plan of Connectivity by ensuring that not in too distant a future there will be seamless road travel between this part of ASEAN and India. So the roads can begin anywhere in Vietnam and go right through via Myanmar into India. And therefore we are looking at the eastern part, northeast part of India as a place that should beckon business from Singapore to provide connectivity, have free sky advantage of any number of flights coming in, bringing people, bringing in investment, and exploring possibilities in an area that still is open for enormous new ideas. I think that this is about as much as I would want to say about ASEAN, but I could go on for much longer. I've told you about Central Asia, and I want to tell you a little bit more about our engagement of Africa and beyond. We are committed to Africa, and it's important here that I bring into this perspective our engagement of China. China is also a strategic partner of India, but China does have issues with India. We have issues with China, but the good news is that we have learned, China and India have learned, and found it necessary, important and essential to ring-fence differences of perception, particularly as far as the border areas are concerned, and to engage in a productive manner, without any reservation, in the fields where we have a potential for mutual growth and connectivity. And that's the area of trade, that's the area of investment. Our Prime Minister is in China, and he has, I think, inked a very important further agreement for tranquility on the border with China. And I think that if there is an example of far-sightedness, maturity, patience and understanding with which two countries have civilizationally dealt with each other, it is in this ring fencing of the difficult areas. But we see China both as a partner and we see China as competition. And I think that's a good thing. Competition is a good thing in the marketplace. It's a bad thing not to have competition at all. And therefore, be it Africa, be it Europe, be it Southeast Asia, we are there, but we are, I think, two different models. we present two different models of partnership, of business, of commercial interface. And that's the good thing, is that on a menu, you have, for some things, perhaps a better proposition from China, for some things, a better proposition from India. But for the Asian reality to manifest itself truly, it is important that India and China work together. And we look forward to being able to do that in the years to come. And surely, some of the platforms and areas and landscapes in which we will engage with each other are areas such as ASEAN and areas such as Africa. ASEAN, of course, has many other levels. We have the engagement in ASEAN. We have also the engagement with this region in BIMSTEC. We have engagement in this region in the Mekong-Ganga collaboration and cooperation. And therefore, we can see that there is a lot that is going to happen over the years to come. Now, we invite you. We invite you from ASEAN and from Singapore to look at critical areas of interest which are beneficial to both sides. The Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor. Singapore is already engaged, but can be engaged in a much greater way by developing its own industrial zones along the DMIC corridor. Something like virtual cities, the little Singapores that I talked about. We can get that on the DMIC, we can get that in the Chennai, Bangalore Industrial Corridor, we can get it on the Buddhist circuit, and as I said, on the Northeast. And I think this is the important message that I would give here to people who are committed to a relationship between Singapore and ourselves. There is an important relationship that I must talk about, and that's the relationship with the United States of America. We have drifted apart from the United States of America for obvious reasons. The NAM movement, the inability of American foreign policy scholars and advisors to see the idea of an autonomous foreign policy as being acceptable to them. Not hostile, simply autonomous. But we had major concerns that kept us away from the United States. In fact, made us drift, but that didn't mean that we didn't have a relationship with them. Even when we were estranged or known as estranged democracies, described as estranged democracies, we had enormous amount of intellectual talent moving both ways. We still had enormous amount of trade and investment moving both ways. But an enormous new chapter was written when the 123 Civil Nuclear Agreement was signed between India and the United States of America. And I acknowledge that as a very important, far-reaching, and I believe a very courageous step that was taken by President Bush to change the entire landscape, not just for our two countries, but indeed for the whole world. I do believe that the world will never be the same place after this enormous breakthrough that President Bush successfully managed with our Prime Minister in the signing of this important agreement. Today, we look forward to working with the United States of America as friends and partners, not as allies, as friends and partners in a vast number of fields. Those fields include even in the areas where we have differences. There are differences. There are differences in climate change, there are differences in WTO, there are differences in issues such as food security, carve-outs, and so on. But the important thing is that we are able to talk to them as friends. That we are able to say to them that this is not because we don't find your perceptions acceptable, but it's only because we need to continue addressing concerns of our own society. We are here in the G20. We are in the marketplace of the world. We want a free exchange of ideas. We've opened up all shutters and we are letting winds blow through our country. But it's important at the end of the day that the very important landmarks that we remember from our history, which is ensure that whatever we do is felt as a positive step for the vast population of our country. We have a bludgeoning middle class, a growing middle class. This is our strength, but this is also an enormous responsibility. And this is no time to talk about the challenges of dealing with a growing middle class. They are great political challenges. They are great challenges of democratic institutions. But this is also our strength. And I do believe the ballast and the strength that the Indian economy has, the Indian political economy has, comes from this remarkable middle class. But into this middle class, we want to connect those who may feel deprived or disenchanted. And that's where, despite our commitment to opening up market opportunity, we have ensured that we don't let go of the social sector commitments that we have. India today has the largest and the most ambitious food security system under a new law, the food security law. We have today the largest, most ambitious free education program that we give to children from the ages of 6 and 14 in every part of our country, with midday meals to go with free education. We have today a very ambitious health program, swipe card health program for people living below the poverty line, and we have a very ambitious housing program for people living below the poverty line. The challenge in the years to come will be the challenge of the bell curve, the people in the middle classes. As their aspirations grow, the dreams become greater, and therefore their expectations become a major challenge for us. And I hope that in that process, Singapore and ASEAN and many other friends from across the globe will join India, not only in celebrating the success of our democracy, but also in strengthening and consolidating our economy. Thank you very much.
Minister, I owe you an apology, because when we were planning this session, and the format, I told the High Commissioner that having had a public lecture not too long ago, it would be difficult to get a large enough crowd. I totally underestimated the pull factor. She understood it very well. And she insisted, and we had this, I think, almost the same faces, but much more. And I think they have come back to listen to you again. You are a very impressive speaker, fluent, elegant. You said your language with allusions to Hamlet and E.M. Foster. So people are enthused by what you're saying. But that preamble was a preamble to ask a not so pleasant a question. Because I wanted to talk a little, ask a question on ASEAN. What Minister said is true, that India treats ASEAN as a central role in this part, centrality of ASEAN. However, ASEAN is like a young woman, a damsel, with many suitors. And suitors who come with flowers don't impress her that much as those who come with tangible economic opportunities. And what is happening is there are so many deals being struck between ASEAN and several of the major powers around with attractive economic packages. We haven't seen the same from India. As a person from a very small country, I know that it is difficult for us to imagine the complexities of a large country like India. But having said that, there seems to be still room to use your vast market to get not only Singapore, but the other ASEAN countries into more productive, more profitable sort of relationship. What would you say if I said that Singapore, not only Singapore, but ASEAN generally, is not moving that fast with India as with some of the other countries? Minister, for your comment before I open it to others.
Well, I think that if I had said that, it would be more justified. We want more of your attention to India. But if you're saying that you want more opportunity in India, my answer to you is it's there. We will give it to you. Our commitment is to give Singapore, ASEAN, and other friends who want to come and invest in our country the best opportunity. And I think that we've been working on that in the DMIC, for instance. We are looking at investment opportunities where all the delay issues that have been a problem in the past have been addressed through special special purpose vehicles that get all the clearances in advance, even before the investors come in. So I think there have been some issues of bureaucratic delays in our country that we have tried to address. I explained to you that we went through a difficult learning curve as far as our courts were concerned, and I do believe that now, having gone through the worst, we are now able to deal with the courts much better, because it's a learning curve not just for them, but it's a learning curve for us as well. I think we didn't put our case to them very well, and they therefore didn't give us the kind of judgments and attention that we deserved. Much of that is now behind us, and I do think that the efforts that the Finance Minister has made in recent weeks and months are efforts that will certainly will make the landscape far more attractive for you. What I suggest is, and I urge you to have faith in India. It's an important thing to have faith. You can be excited about what India offers in due course, but to begin with, please come, have faith in us. There is a lot of good that is going on, and a lot of that has come from you as well. I think let's look at the success stories. Let's look at the iconic stories, and let's see if we can add muscle to that. We are determined because we know that there is no other path. This path of rapid growth is the only path that we have. We resolve many issues. We need to resolve many more, but I think we can do it together. I can only promise you the best effort.
Thank you, Guru. I don't want to monopolize the conversation. Mr. Burki. Can somebody give me Maybe you can use much.
Well, Mr. Minister, congratulations. That was a very good speech, and I hope what you said about your country will materialize, and the difficulties that you have on the economic side are short-lived. I'm originally from Pakistan. I was briefly finance minister of the country, so I know a lot of very senior people in Pakistan, and I've just come back after meeting with some of those people. Spend some time with you also. I come back with the following perception, which is that you have leadership in Pakistan now, which is very anxious to develop a solid economic relationship with India. Nawaz Sharif said yesterday or the day before that he's prepared to walk more than half the way in order to have good, working, solid relationship. In your own speech, you said a lot about East, ASEAN, and so on. You did refer to enormous amount of opportunities in segregation and so on. My question to you is, and I've done some work in this area, that if we, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and so forth, cast off the burden of history and focus on economic issues, everybody benefits. last year, I went to Delhi a couple of times at the invitation of a couple of institutions. I made this speech in a kind of emotional way. And the answer that I got was somewhat disturbing. And in one session I said, are you saying to me that you treat Pakistan not as an opportunity, but as a problem? And one person said, you have beautifully summarized the attitude that we have in the country to our northwest. What I'm saying is, and I know this, with dozens of conversations with people who really matter these days, that they are raring to go, but they are upset at the lack of response that they're getting from Delhi. And you are in a position where some of this could be fixed, and I know for certain that you will get an enormous response from Pakistan in order to make an economic relationship really work.
Thank you, Javed.
Well, thank you very much. I think you're just urging me to join you in this aspiration, and I have no hesitation at all. I agree with what you've said. I think it's important. But might I just suggest that both Pakistan and India, in our relationship, show signs of schizophrenia. We haven't been able to do with Pakistan, and you've not been able to do that with us, that we have succeeded in doing with China. We haven't had a single casualty at the Chinese border now for 2 decades. We do have a difference of perception. We do have some enormous psychological difficulties from time to time, but we've learned to contain our differences. I think that's the very significant thing that's happened between India and China. We would like to do that much more with Pakistan, because Pakistan is, in that sense, closer to us than China is. We rejoice in each other's company. When we meet in unofficial meetings, we are like long lost friends and brothers. We can't do without your music, you can't do without our films. I think many of your people, their first destination, choice of destination is India. And for many of our people, particularly in North India, the first choice of destination is Pakistan. Our MPs go there and come back with remarkably positive stories. And I'm sure that your MPs will come and meet us, go back with similar stories. Yet, your parliament and our parliament passes such stern messages to each other periodically. And I think there is something that is missing somewhere. Now, there are various explanations of that. Who's in control, who's not in control. We have a wild media. And your people from Pakistan are happy to come on our wild media and add to the wild exchanges that take place. I think if we didn't have the media, we would be fine. But since neither you nor we can switch off the media, we should just ignore it. I think it's very important that we ignore it. I've stopped going to our media programs, particularly when they want to ask me about Pakistan, because the first thing they say to me is, you are a softie. Despite the fact that our soldiers are being killed, you're still smiling and saying we should talk. And I have to say to them, would you like me to start killing as well? I mean, what do you want me to do? I think that it's important that we do something that our Prime Minister said to your Prime Minister during the meeting in New York, and I think that's language that both can use. Our Prime Minister said to your Prime Minister, you'll have to show some leadership. You have to show some leadership. And he said, he looked at my Prime Minister, held his hand and said, I was 14 months in jail and 7 years outside my country. Don't you think that's leadership? Now, that was a good message between those two. And I really celebrated that. And I do believe that that's the message that must permeate at all levels in our country and yours. we do understand that the younger people in Pakistan during the campaign supported the Prime Minister's indication to them that he wanted a better relationship with India. So the answer, of course, lies in giving up our historical baggage or putting it away for a while, or ring-fencing it as we've done with China, and then continuing. And frankly, when you asked us for power and electricity and gas, we assured of it ourselves, but we didn't say, can't give you. We immediately said we will give you, right? And if it's a serious demand, we will give it to you. And I think that if it means going an extra mile from our side, because he's coming an extra mile on his side, we will do it. So an extra mile means that we won't meet at the Wagah. We'll either meet in Pakistan or we will meet in India. But we would welcome it. We would welcome it. But there are, pardon my saying so, there are some people in the entire landscape that don't want us to be friends. So I think if you recall a particular scene from, it's in the end of Passage to India, Aziz and Fielding riding on 2 horses. And Fielding reaches out to him and says, Aziz, why can't we be friends? And a rock juts in between, and the horses part. And Aziz says, it looks that it can't be now, it can't be here. First we will throw you out and then we'll be friends. So it's that rock in between that we have to address. I'd be very happy to talk to you about how we can get rid of that rock.
Another quote from Ian. That's another quote from Ian Foster. Come, this is.
Hi, Venkat here from ICI. Thank you so much for a very honest and genuine speech. I think I really like it. When you look at it from outside, from India, the 3 areas of concern for any investor or anybody for the matter. 1, judiciary, especially the speed of judicial judgments in terms of cases drawing for 20-30 years. 2, tax reforms, both direct and indirect. And the 3rd, of course, corruption. The last 30-40 years, whatever you talk about, these 3 areas still at a very primitive stage. What the government is doing to change that? Thank you.
Okay. See, as far as the court systems are concerned, we are very conscious that the courts take too long. Now it's a matter of what you prioritize and put on a fast track. Many courts now are dealing with cases a lot faster than they did. The Supreme Court has a special committee, and there is a separate setup as well. They are interfacing and interacting on how we can put the entire court system on a special grid by which all pendencies in any court will be known, the causes of pendency will be known, that people will have better availability of precedents, and therefore, because of conflicting precedents, cases will not keep lingering and so on. There is an attitudinal problem, there is also a problem of resources, and there's a problem of structure. We are trying to address that, and the idea was my predecessor in the Ministry of Law and Justice, Mr. Moily, had actually given a date by which he said that we will bring down the pendency to 1/3 or 1/4. I tried to work on that as well. Some of the interesting experiments that we have done, for instance, in the Delhi High Court, we now have 10 courts in the Delhi High Court which are paperless courts. No judge has to take any file home, no paper gets lost, no paper has to be given physically. Judges come with a pen drive, their entire reading material on a pen drive, everything is available on a screen. You can do patents cases, you can do, so nobody has to say, I have to go and fetch this, I have to go and fetch that. The moment lower courts decide a criminal case in Delhi, the file of that criminal case automatically is transferred electronically to the High Court. So the previous experience of having to wait for the files to come physically from one court to the other court is gone. The court fees are now being paid through a gateway. That can be done electronically. You can get judgments electronically. A lot of this is beginning to happen, and I think in the next 5 years we will be able to resolve it. For people interested in commercial transactions, I tried very hard to bring in a special system of fast-track courts for high-value commercial matters. It got stuck because there were different opinions opinions about whether you should have an appellate, have an opinion between the High Court and the Supreme Court or not, or should it go directly to the Supreme Court? That's being worked out. But I think a lot of things a lot of our problem was also caused by the time it took to appoint judges. And we now have new legislation on the anvil that will hopefully speed up the appointment of judges. So we are addressing this issue. It's an important thing, and I am therefore very glad our Chief Justice is coming to Singapore in the next few days. I have recommended to him that our judges should work more closely with judges here in Singapore in order to learn systems and court management, which I think is a very critical part of court proceedings. You mentioned the issue of tax reform. The tax reform is something that is a high priority with us. There are some issues on tax, for instance, the retrospective tax issues, etc., which Mr. Chidambaram has already tried to sort out, and I think over the next 2 months that issue will be sorted out. There's a little bit to be done by way of legislation, which will be done in December, but otherwise I think in terms of policy, that issue that arose with the Vodafone case is going to get resolved. Our main thing is that the huge tax reform that we want to bring in is being stuck. It's being stuck because, not because people have fundamental differences of ideology, but there's a strange thing happening in our politics these days, that everyone wants to take credit for legislation, and they say, well, we'll do it in our time. And their time doesn't come, so they keep waiting for their time to come, but that's another story. On corruption, I'll tell you something very frankly. I don't believe India is half as corrupt as it's made out to be. There is a difference between being messy, making a dishonest mistake, and being corrupt. Very sadly in India, agencies and organizations have fudged the difference between an honest mistake and corruption. Anyone who works will make an honest mistake, and I do believe that the investment sector, you people prefer guys who make honest mistakes when they come to borrow money, because we say, well, this guy has made his mistakes now, he will not be a non-performing asset. But we have a problem. We don't see a difference between an honest mistake and corruption. And I think, therefore, when I said the courts have to deal attitudinally with a lot of these issues, there is corruption. I'm not saying there's no corruption. But simply because you disagree with some policy decision, you can't say this policy decision is corrupt, right? Corruption must be found in the way in which we all find corruption, which is there must be a physical quid pro quo. There must be something which is illegitimate that must be transferred. There must be some benefit that is being drawn, which is an illegitimate benefit. Simply because you're a big company, simply because you're a successful man and you get a coal mine doesn't mean that you're corrupt and I'm corrupt for giving it to you. So I urge everyone to learn to distinguish between an honest mistake and corruption. There is a difference, and I think we are maturing as a system, and we will learn to make this distinction, which doesn't mean that you shouldn't reprimand a person for an honest mistake. You can reprimand, you can encourage, you can reprimand, you can discourage, you can put in a disincentive, but that is not corruption. So, but having said that, to address corruption, the courts have done a lot. And we encourage that, and we are happy to help them do that. But we are also putting in transparency systems. For instance, the right to information is a major restriction now on corruption, because whatever you do is to come out in the open. Secondly, we are now introducing the citizen charter, so that people will have a right to get a decision within a certain number of days, hours, or whatever. So there will be no incentive to delay something and then have a quid pro quo in order to do it. Thirdly, we are introducing some other anti-corruption measures in various other fields, including government procurement and so on and so forth. So by the end of the year, I think we will have a very fairly stable menu of what we can do to address corruption. But finally, corruption is an attitude, and I think that we have to address that as well. And an attitude that changes by ensuring that honest people have incentives. honest people must not have disincentives. So if we give honest people incentives, and I think that is part of the market principle, that you recognize in the market what is good and what is valuable and what is honest, and you reward it.
Yes.
Hello, Your Excellency, Mr. Salman Khurshid. Thank you very much for your message. Thoroughly enjoyed listening to you. Missed the previous sessions, but I'm glad I came by today. I wanted to understand your perspective in your capacity as the External Affairs Minister of our country on the situation in the Maldives. Now, there has been a widespread disappointment in the Indian community, both in India and abroad, both through conventional media and through social media, about the perceived lack of action from India and the passivity. But I wanted to understand your perspective on this, especially given the fears that we are being encircled by China and so on and so forth. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
See, this is a very difficult, call for us. Our relationship is with Maldives, not with a political party or a political individual in Maldives. Each one of us can have personal preferences because we work with some of them, we know some of them well, we've enjoyed the company of some of them, but at the end of the day, we deal, as a government, we deal with the government of Maldives. Now, we've never subscribed as a country, we've never subscribed as in, to the idea of intervention. We don't believe in interfering in internal affairs of any country. And it can't be that we say to the world, don't interfere in something that is our internal matter, but we will interfere in your internal matter. See, even in Syria, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, our position has been very consistent. Our position has been that there is no value and no sense and no moral right in reordering a society from the outside, using military intervention as a way of imposing your will upon the people. Even when you think something wrong is happening, you have to have some restraint upon yourself. Now, I do know that the United Nations are evolving, and there are people who believe in R2P, right to protect, and there are these coalitions of the willing and so on. But India has never been party to this, and I think consistently with that position we have said we are deeply disappointed at what happened in Maldives. Not just now, but earlier as well. And we, in a very restrained and in a very objective manner, earlier also said we felt that there should be a free and fair election which is inclusive, and there should be no attempt to exclude somebody from that election. And we said it not because it's good for India, we said it because it's good for Maldives. If you don't let everybody compete and you don't know who deserves and who doesn't deserve because of the preference of your people, you will never have a stable democracy. And that's what we insisted, and we were very glad to see Maldives move towards a free and fair election in which the results were in front of you. But they're not satisfied, their institutions are not satisfied, the Supreme Court is not satisfied, or any other institution is not satisfied, and they want to do it again. Well, it's their choice. We can only say that as friends, as partners, it would be good for them, as indeed it would be good for everybody, if there was free and fair election, and whoever wins should be accepted as the leader of that country. We don't have our own choice and preference at all. Now, if we interfere, we may be giving a handle to somebody to say India is playing the big brother. We don't want to play big brother. They are hugely dependent on us in many ways, and we cherish and value our friendship with them. We don't want to use any bargaining chip, except for what moral authority we have and whatever we believe that they would take as a serious advice coming from a country that cares for Maldives, is what we have done. Now, the latest announcement is they will not be able to meet the 11th November date, but deadline, but they will have an election between just before 11th November, and then later on there's the second round, 17th. So we're keeping our fingers crossed, and we have categorically, along with other friends of Maldives, said that we do hope that the elections will go through and that there will be no resort to violence on any side, that peacefully they should accept whatever the democratic decision is. So I know that sometimes people may say that, we are disappointed you're not intervening and interfering, but I think it's good for Maldives, good for us, and good for the world that we don't intervene.
Good evening, Honorable Minister. Thank you very much for your very honest and genuine speech. What is our policy, foreign policy, about genetically modified food and seeds bringing to India? What is our stance there?
I think this is a very divided house on this in India. My colleague Mr. Jairam Ramesh has spent a lot of time arguing with a lot of people when he was the Minister for Environment. Of late, there's less talk about this, but I think that there are some reservations amongst stakeholders about genetically modified seeds. Not for the same reason as maybe seen elsewhere. We have some concerns. We have some concerns about biodiversity. We have some concerns about preserving indigenous material and seeds, and there is some evidence to the effect that some of these could be destructive of Indian breeds, and therefore worrisome. But amongst our scientists, there are 2 points of view. Some believe it's good, some believe it's not such a good idea. I think what complicates is the presence of large multinationals. When there's a presence of large multinationals, a lot of NGOs working up against them, then it becomes difficult to be objective. But I think the debate is still going on. It escalates and then it goes down a bit, but the debate and the jury is still out on it as far as India is concerned.
I'm sorry, we are a little running short of time, but there are 2 people here. The lady first, and then the gentleman. And after that, I will have to pass it to Narana Mohan to give his thank you. Lady.
Your Excellency, could you please say a little bit more about the role of diaspora in the economic imperatives of Indian foreign policy, given the recent rupee crisis, or on the other side, the political side, a little bit more about even the historical example that you gave with the recent nuclear deal. What's the role of India's diaspora in foreign policy?
Well, I think that the Indian diaspora has played a very, very important role, and I think is in keeping with our assessment of their importance and value that we created a separate ministry for overseas Indians. There has been a growing engagement and growing participation of Indian diaspora. Now you know that we've introduced the PIO card, the overseas Indian citizenship. We now allow non-resident Indians to vote if they are registered as voters within the country, but they still have to travel to the country to vote. I think logistically and for many other reasons, we haven't yet reached the level where they could vote wherever they are or go to the mission and vote, but I hope that in the future that will happen. Perhaps they can vote online. I think these things will happen. Now, a lot of the advantages that they had to begin with are advantages that are disappearing because the general base of opportunity has been expanded. There was a time when there were exceptional opportunities to them which were not available to resident Indians, and a lot of incentives that were given to them. Now those incentives have reduced considerably because resident Indians also have been given the same kind of opportunity. But there are still many, many important areas in which they continue to have an advantage and they continue to take benefits of that advantage. But as far as our engagement with them is concerned, we do have the annual conference where the diaspora comes and they make contributions and they learn about what is happening in the country. But I think that we need to have a fresh look at it. Diaspora of other countries, I think China, for instance, are really credited with enormous amount of investment coming into China. I don't think that we and our diaspora compares that well with China as far as investment is concerned. But we value their contributions, we value their presence in the world, and I think that in our engagement with the world, their presence is wonderful. I was in Canada recently, and every meeting I had in Canada with my counterpart or any other minister, across the table, a majority of people were largely of Indian origin. And at the lunch, the foreign minister actually said, don't worry, I'm the only white man here, because the rest look like you. Now, I think this is a wonderful thing that the world is changing, and that our people are now, second generation, third generation, doing so remarkably well. Some of them are in top offices, political offices in Parliament, in Senate, governors of states in the US. I met many parliamentarians in Canada of Indian origin, and it's very satisfying and very gratifying that we are doing so well in the world.
Minister, with your permission, I cannot let this opportunity pass. Singapore is going to have a South Asian Diaspora Convention, November 21st and 22nd. This is a word from the sponsor. It's organized by the South Asian Institute, and several leaders from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh are coming. Please come for that and we can discuss this. Next, the last question. This gentleman.
I'd love to hear your views on one, from your vantage point, which is a very, very senior person in the Indian establishment. What do you believe are the principal risks that keep you awake at night from an economic perspective? What can India have? What could happen which could hurt Indian economy badly? And a second one in a lighter way, why does every political party still send their spokesperson to participate in the late night jamboree that happens every night?
That's good. It's our commitment to free speech and television that makes us send our people there. It's almost in the nature of sending somebody to the slaughterhouse. It's just that they survive and come back to fight another day. As you know, I now go very seldom because I think that it's a case of diminishing returns. It's sad. It is sad, because I think our country deserves more rational conversations between political parties to offer a range of options to people to choose from, and not to be screaming and shouting at each other. But this is the latest version of the Indian soap opera. So I think if you just take it in that spirit, then it will not at least make you lose your night's sleep. I don't lose my night's sleep over it. In fact, it often puts me to sleep. What do I really worry about? I think what we really worry, we don't really worry about fundamentals, but we worry about lost opportunities. We think that the world is moving very fast. We cherish our democracy and we value our democracy. We couldn't really agree with former Prime Minister Mahathir when he at a lecture in India said, what you suffer from is an excess of democracy. We don't really believe that, because we do cherish our democracy. It's sometimes noisy, sometimes untidy, sometimes painful, sometimes aggressive, but we value it, because I think any other option would be far more detrimental to our intellectual growth than an untidy democracy is. But what we do worry about, and I think that it's a very serious matter, is that we shouldn't lose the opportunity that we have. Whatever Ambassador Pillay said right at the beginning about some doubt about our intent and our determination and our commitment, our ability and capacity to respond to friendly investors from Singapore, for instance, coming to India. Now, if that becomes true, there are obviously elements of this which we have to address, and that we have to then ensure that we convey to you that we have addressed, and then we show proof of the pudding is in eating. We show that the pudding does taste good. But if we miss out on this because we get preoccupied with divisive politics at home, one-upmanship at home, and allow the decibels of our political discourse, or lack of it, to defeat the purpose today of national cause to get India moving, we would be in trouble. I think that while all of you can play a very important role in India's growth story, I do understand that ultimately the responsibility rests on our own shoulders. And those of us who are elected to represent Indians in Parliament and to serve them in government obviously have that much of a larger responsibility, and therefore more reasons for originality. But it's not so bad. It's not so bad. We work hard, we get tired, and we get a good night's sleep. And then we wake up in the morning and we begin again. So there's a lot of hard work to do, but I think that we'll get there. We will overcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I think you answered the questions very comprehensively and to the point. I will not make a long thank you speech because Narayana Mohan is waiting with his text. So I will now ask him to give the thanks.
Mr. Narayana Mohan, the Chairman of the Singapore Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry.
Thank you, Minister. His Excellency Shri Salman Khurshid, External Affairs Minister, Government of India, Her Excellency Mrs. Vijay Thakur Singh, India's High Commissioner to Singapore, Ambassador Gopinath Pillai, Chairman of ISA's Institute of South Asian Studies, Girija Pandey, Past Chairman of India Business Forum, Mr. Venkat, President of ICA's in the chapter. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I am moved by your conference in India with your elegant speech, and also created a lot of confidence in the minds of all of us here, and also we are very, very confident that India will grow in the future and also will achieve the 5% and the 8% growth in the years to come by God's grace. With all the best. I would like to firstly thank not only you and also our Mr. Ambassador Gopinath Pillai for moderating the dialogue section today. Girija Pandey has briefed us also about the outstanding career which you had and as a minister, and about your past history, and also the various enthusiastically you have written the books which has been made known to the audience here. The minister also interacted and highlighted matters concerning with India's economy, India's relationship with all the countries in the world like US, China and ASEAN, and he also has gone out to talk about the foreign policies India is taking out with all the countries, and especially with Pakistan, and also the interest in developing a greater relationship with Pakistan so that things will move well for both the countries' economies. Asia seems to outpace the rest of the world over the next few decades, with China and India expected to become significant global growth engines. India's recent rupee crisis is on its road to recovery, and we hope that it will go faster, as Minister was giving us a lot of confidence. Not only the deficit will come down from 5% to 2.5%, sorry, 4.9% to 2.5% is what he is expecting for. Minister has said that Singapore is an inspiration and explained about the success story and the country's close relationship with India. Among the ASEAN, and the relationship with ASEAN is also growing fast, and it's good for the India's economies to grow. Not only touched on the various issues about the growth story, the new equitable society India is moving towards, and also about the people started looking into the government for the business needs. Foreign policy, which he talked about, also, which is not only equitable, it's also globally looked into with national consensus, and he also talked about Gandhiji's era, talked about Jawaharlal Nehru's eras, and make us to go back to the history. We are moved and thrilled by your speech, sir. Minister also informed us about Luki's policy dimension involved investment and technology. He also talked about India is also interested to look to increase the external economy. And I think immediately about Singapore, which has built up a large external economy to support the Singapore economy. India will certainly achieve, and it's happening, which we are also seeing now. Saving rate is going in India, which is always constantly there, and that's the nature of most of the Indians in India. A very interesting thing when she was asking about diaspora, I also would like to add to that, where India is getting the maximum number of remittances among the countries in the world. India gets nearly $70 billion of remittance, followed by China, Philippines, and the rest of the countries. So all these things are going to augment the growth of India. Certainly it's going to 5% growth when compared to most of the countries in the world is certainly good, because when the economy is developing, the chances, the rate of getting the growth rate higher and higher is going to be more and more difficult, which all of you know about it. All the learned audience here will be aware about it. I would like to conclude my speech and also would like to extend my sincere thanks to the Confederation of Indian Industry, NUS, ISAS, ICAI, Singapore chapter, SICCI, where I am part of that, for supporting today's function. I would also like to give a heartfelt vote of thanks to all our distinguished guests who have graciously accepted the invitation and made their presence here. Thank you.